Kia ora, bula vanaka, talofalava, malo alale, and welcome everybody. It's wonderful to see so many familiar names and faces, and we are delighted to bring you this webinar focusing on our new Pacific Islands Regional Marine Species Program 2022 to 2026. It is an opportunity for us to exchange information on implementation progress on the new plan, but especially for us to learn more about your priorities and needs when it comes to conservation, protection of our iconic marine species. So first off, I would like to introduce the SPREP team here that are helping me with this webinar. I'd like to introduce Hannah Hendriks. Hannah hails from the Department of Conservation in New Zealand, and she is our Migratory Marine Species Conservation Officer. And also like to introduce Unity, who's just turning his camera on to say hello. And Unity is our Turtle Conservation Officer. All right, so what we're going to cover today, first of all, a little bit of global context, then a discussion about the species groups, and there'll be opportunities, as we've said, to answer questions about those. We're going to talk about the program and also about the review that was conducted back in 2020 of the previous plans. We're going to have a summary of the action plans, the new action plans, and we're going to talk a bit about the current and future work by SPREP that we're doing to implement the plans. We're going to talk a bit about implementation priorities and needs. And then we have a guest speaker who's going to talk about the GEF 8 star funding, which can assist with some of your implementation plans. And finally, there will be a little bit of other items of interest. All right, moving right along. So as environmental managers, you will know more than most the issues our planet faces. And we're talking about the triple planetary crises of climate change, pollution, and biodiversity loss. These are inextricably linked, and synergistic effects exacerbate each of these crises. Of course, we humans rely on nature for our sustenance, our shelter, and the richness of our Pacific cultures are embedded in the natural world. None more so than our iconic marine species, our whales and dolphins, turtles, dugong sharks and rays, and seabirds, which contribute to our Pacific identity and are often keystone species in marine ecosystems. These groups are highly threatened, often facing multiple human-induced threats. We now have a new global biodiversity framework under the Convention on Biodiversity, which sets out a pathway towards sustainable management of the natural world. And funding from GEF 8 is targeted to support the development and implementation of national biodiversity strategies and action plans. For us in the Pacific, marine species are a core part of our biodiversity. Our new Pacific Island Regional Marine Species Program is designed to help members identify actions to assist with conserving our most precious biodiversity for ourselves and for future generations. And funding from GEF 8 could support this. Okay, we're now going to talk a little bit about the species that are in the plans. These are our turtles, our seabirds, sharks and rays, whales and dolphins and dugongs. And for generations, they've been culturally important for sustenance, for jewelry. They've been depicted in art, music and dance. And some species were probably key to guiding long-distance navigation across the Pacific. Many of these species are also important for livelihoods such as tourism. Who doesn't want to swim with a whale or turtle in the crystal clear waters of the Pacific? But as important as these species are, their populations are continuing to decline, and it is up to us to do something about that. So now I'm going to go through each species group, talk a little bit about what they are, a little bit about their threats, and then there'll be opportunities for you to answer some questions. So first of all, an introduction to marine turtles. Green and hawksbill turtles are most widely recorded in the Pacific and appear in nearly all countries and territories and nest in many. But it's the hawksbill and leatherback that are critically endangered. You'll know also that turtles are considered very good indicators of coastal and marine ecosystem health, as they need high quality food and water and healthy habitat. And of course, because of their threat status, all turtles are on the CITES Appendix 1 list. The tables that we're showing here now show the conservation status and the presence of turtles in the Pacific Island countries and territories. All the tables that we'll be presenting to you today are available in the program document itself. And you'll also note that Unity's put a link to the Pacific Island Marine Species Program in the chat, and that is now available in both English and French. Okay, so what are the key threats facing turtles in the Pacific? So some of the most important threats that we know about are things such as the direct take or harvesting of turtles, also bycatch. And when we're talking about bycatch, we're talking not just in industrial fisheries such as tuna fisheries, but also in coastal fisheries where they're using especially nets, for example. Coastal development is another problem. We know that, of course, turtles nest along the coast, so coastal development is potentially a problem unless we're particularly careful about where we focus our coastal development. Pollution and pathogens, and we're talking all types of pollution, but we also know for turtles that plastic pollution is a particular problem. And of course, climate change and all of the effects that come from climate change, including things such as increasing temperature. Okay, so now we're going to do a poll where you get the opportunity to tell us what you think are the greatest threats to turtles. Let's end the poll. And share the results. All right, interesting. So it's like 27% equally felt that harvesting and bycatch were the biggest threats in your particular countries. And then pollution and climate change next, with coastal development coming last. And the long answers aren't shown, but we will summarise those at the end in our final report. Thank you. So it looks like we need about 5 minutes for each poll. Great. All right. Well, thank you for that. And we'll move on to the next species, an introduction to seabirds. We have around 40 species breeding in the Pacific and a lot more that migrate through. And amongst those, 17 are unique to the region. 11 species of these seabirds are threatened with extinction. Seabirds, of course, include tropical seabirds such as noddies, boobies and terns, as well as petrels. And it's the petrel species which are often the most unknown, the most cryptic, and the locations of the breeding sites of these species are often unknown. So the program contains the tables listing all of the species present in and occurring in the region, including their threat status and their presence in each country and territory. So we've got separate tables that show those that are breeding, and then we also have another table which shows those that migrate through. So what are the key threats facing seabirds? Of course, seabirds live both on land and at sea. They make their living at sea, but they have to come back to land to breed. So they suffer from impacts both on land and at sea. Probably one of the most pervasive threats to seabirds are invasive alien predators such as rats. and many of you will be familiar with the impact of those. There is unsustainable harvesting in some jurisdictions. Light pollution can be a problem, the same as it is for turtles, particularly petrel species, which when they come out of their burrows for the first time and head out to sea, if there are lights, for example, which is shown in the picture below, then that can be a problem and will prevent them from actually making it out to sea. Bycatch is a big issue for some species, particularly albatrosses and petrels in the Pacific. And habitat loss, which could be for anything from mining to logging of forests where they breed. Oops, sorry, poll. Right, now it's your opportunity to tell us what you think. Okay, yes, most of you thought invasive alien predators were the biggest threat to seabirds, followed by unsustainable harvesting and then habitat loss. Okay, thank you. All right, let's move on to the next species group. So sharks and rays. Of course, this group includes sharks, rays, skates, and a group called chimeras, which is a very old species. The International Union for the Conservation of Nature has assessed around 1,200 of the approximately 1,250 known species in the world. And I was interested to read just the other day, actually, the numbers of species continue to grow that are discovered. So there's a lot more to learn about sharks and rays, particularly from the deep sea. Sharks and rays occupy a range of trophic niches, from planktivorous sharks, such as whale and basking sharks, to the very top predators that feed on marine mammals. Nearly all of the 189 shark and ray species that have been recorded so far in the Pacific have been assessed by the IUCN. And about half of these have been estimated to be threatened or nearly threatened. So in relation to CITES, the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species, some groups are on Appendix 1, but many more species are on Appendix 2. So they're allowed to be harvested and traded. One of the features of a lot of our marine species groups is the fact that they are slow to mature and have a very low reproductive rate. And this is one of the things that makes them particularly vulnerable to threats. So we know there are around 17 shark sanctuaries worldwide, and that covers more than 19 million square kilometres of ocean, which is an area twice the size of Europe. And Pacific countries are increasingly recognising the threats to sharks. So of the 17 global sanctuaries, 8 of these are found in the Pacific. And those belong to Palau, Marshall Islands, French Polynesia, Cook Islands, New Caledonia, FSM, Kiribati, and Samoa, and they cover an estimated total of around 17 million square kilometres. And I know that there are other countries in the Pacific who are also considering placing shark sanctuaries over their territorial waters. So what are the key threats for sharks? Targeted commercial fishing is one of the primary threats to sharks that we know of. But also artisanal fishing is an issue, particularly for some of our more rare and threatened species in coastal areas. They can get accidentally caught in gill nets, and this is potentially a big problem. A lot of those species have very good populations remaining in the Pacific, but the threat from gill net fishing is significant. Bycatch is also an issue, and of course habitat loss, for example, from sedimentation and the impact on coastal species. Right, so we now have another poll. Interested in your thoughts about what are the key threats to sharks and what's happening in your countries to do something about those threats. Let's everybody, let's have a look at the results. So it looks like most of you, 60%, think that bycatch is the biggest threat, followed by habitat loss and targeted commercial fishing equally. Okay, all right, let's go on to the next species group. Whales and dolphins. So around half of the world's 90 species of whales and dolphins occur in the Pacific, at least 30 year-round or seasonal migrants. The most recorded species here include sperm whales, short-fin pilot whales, spinner dolphins, and humpback whales, of course. And endangered species include the sei whale, the blue whale, and the Oceania subpopulation of the humpback whale. And this is another map that is found in our marine species program document, and it shows whales and dolphin protection areas in the Pacific. And you'll see that there are some different categories, which might seem a little bit odd, but the reason we've put that in there is that some countries have actually designated their whole EEZ as whale and dolphin sanctuaries, while countries like New Zealand have not designated it as a sanctuary, but they have legislation in place that fully protects dolphins and whales. So that's the difference there. And the program contains a table listing all the known species and their presence or absence, as far as we know, in each Pacific Island country and territory. And as you can see, there's a lot of gaps and also question marks. And this illustrates just one of the enormous challenges we have in the Pacific with managing marine species, and that is knowledge on even the very basic things such as species distributions and population trends. So what are the key threats? Again, incidental catch and fishing gear interactions is up there. There is still harvesting or direct take of dolphins in the Pacific. And pollution, again, and when we talk about pollution, we're covering all bases when it comes to whales and dolphins. So it could be plastic pollution, and also in this case, noise. Noise is a particular issue for whales and dolphins, which use their sonar for communication and for finding food. And so high levels of noise can be a real issue for them. And also when we talk about plastics, it can also include things such as abandoned, lost and discovered fishing gear and entanglement. Vessel traffic, interactions with vessels can be an issue, probably more of an issue in the North Pacific where there is a lot of vessel traffic, far more than there is perhaps down here, but it can also be an issue. And of course, climate change and ocean physics alteration impacts. All right, next poll. Okay, so what are the results? Wow, 50% feel that pollution is one of the biggest problems for whales and dolphins, and then followed by incidental catch and fishing gear interactions, and then vessel traffic and climate change, 10% equally. Okay, right, let's move on to the final species group. And that is dugongs. And in the Pacific, it supports some of the world's largest remaining populations of dugong. They're long-lived and have a very low reproductive rate, which, similar to some of the other species, makes them particularly vulnerable to threats. They are seagrass community specialists, and they occur in Australia, New Caledonia, Palau, PNG, Solomon Islands, and Vanuatu, and the largest population in the region is in the Torres Strait. Because of their high vulnerability, they are listed on CITES Appendix 1, which means, of course, it's prohibited to trade in dugong parts or live animals. Okay, so what are the key threats facing dugongs? Harvesting or direct take still occurs in parts of the Pacific. Bycatch is also a big issue and possibly increasing issue as people are using gill nets in coastal areas. Habitat loss is also an issue, and that could be related to climate change impacts as well, because of course their seagrass habitats are vulnerable to the impacts of storms and increasing storm severity, and so loss of their seagrass habitat could be exacerbated by climate change, but other things affect habitat, including pollution. And then the other one there is vessel traffic. So dugongs do sometimes get hit by vessels. So interested now in your opinions on what is the biggest threats in your region or your country. Again, we'll give you 5 minutes to complete the poll. Thanks, everybody. So the results are up, and looks like most people felt harvesting or direct take, 38%, followed by habitat loss, and then bycatch, vessel traffic, and climate change are equal on 30%. All right, so thank you very much, everybody, for participating in those polls. It's very much appreciated. And as we said, we will provide a summary report later on.
All right, welcome back, everyone. This is Hannah, and I'll be taking you through this next section to talk a bit more about the program itself. So the Pacific Islands Regional Marine Species Program is a strategy for conserving and managing our marine megafauna, and to support Pacific Island countries and territories to take a primary role in conservation. And it should really be treated as a guide to identify actions and priorities. The vision of the program is a healthy Pacific Ocean with thriving populations of our marine megafauna groups and the associated ecosystems on which they depend and contribute, which assures the aspirations of Pacific Island peoples and protects their natural and cultural heritage. So SPREP's role in the program is to coordinate efforts, assist with building capacity, securing resources, facilitating the exchange of information, monitoring and reporting on the action plans. And of course, we have our threatened and migratory species advisor, Karen, who was just speaking, who helps with all of these things. So I just wanted to quickly go over the previous review, how we got to the current program. So back starting in 2020, we started a review to determine progress on the implementation of the 2013 to 2017 action plans, and identify any issues or challenges with implementing the plans, and obtain some feedback about the plans in general. We tried to have direct country engagement where possible, and we managed to get some engagement from the Solomons, Palau, Tonga, American Samoa, Niue, Tuvalu, New Caledonia, and the Cook Islands, which was great. We also, to make things a bit easier, took information about implementing some of the actions from documents such as national strategies and action plans, state of environment reports, national reports to CBD and CMF, conference reports, and other kind of reports. And we pulled all this information together to create an implementation report, which outlines actions that each country had taken. And this is available on our website. Some of the recommendations that came out from this review included translating the program into French, which has been done and is on our website for download. is to simplify, reduce redundancy and ensure consistency throughout the different action plans. Have some less specificity to provide guidance on what some activities might be, and to reinstate the listserv to improve collaboration across the region. So we pulled all that feedback together and created this new program, which was launched a year ago. It has a new theme on climate change to recognise the increasing and cost-cutting nature of this threat and its potential for synergistic impacts, especially for migratory species. And there is a new seabird action plan, which wasn't a part of the program before. So a quick outline of the program. It's covered by a supporting framework, and then we have 6 action plans, multi-species action plan, as well as one for each of the 5 species groups. The supporting framework has 3 different objectives. So SPREP members and partners are asked to support the plan through the provision of human resources and funding. SPREP has a role in assisting to source funds, particularly for regional level activities that will support conservation across the region. And we'll talk a bit more about funding a little later. And so the layout of the action plans, each action plan has 9 themes: research and monitoring, climate change, ecosystems and habitat protection, threat reduction, cultural significance and value, legislation, policy and management, ecotourism and livelihoods, capacity building and collaboration, and education, awareness and communication. And these themes are consistent throughout the different action plans. So many actions that can be undertaken to support the conservation of our marine species and their habitats are more general in nature, such as managing pollution and coastal development, and implementing these will provide benefits for all species groups and marine ecosystems. So these actions are outlined in this multi-species action plan to reduce the need to repeat each action within each species plan. So you should read the multi-species action plan in conjunction with each of the species-specific plans to get a complete picture of conservation actions for marine species in the Pacific. And so we actually have a poll here to see what you think is the biggest common threat to all marine species in the Pacific region. And it's just one question, so it won't take you too long. The poll and share the results. And bycatch and entanglement is clearly identified as the leading threat, as well as climate change. Cool, thank you. Move on. So each of the species action plans begins with information on these subjects, just an introduction, information about the distribution of the species around the region, species threat status, traditional knowledge and customs, income generating opportunities, and a description of the threats. So this is an example of one of the objectives. So we have theme at the top, then the objective, and we have a couple of actions which are numbered and outline whose responsibility it is. And then each action also has associated indicators and timeframes. And the indicators are shown in brackets next to the action as well. And there will be several objectives within each theme. All right, now I'm going to hand back to Karen to talk a bit about SPREP's implementation.
Thank you, Hannah. And again, if you have any questions that can't wait, do pop them in the chat and we can cover them later on. But there will also be an opportunity later to ask questions. So what I'm going to do now is just run through some of the work that we've been able to implement so far, which works towards implementing objectives and actions in the plan, and also a little bit about what we hope to do in the future. And funding for this work has come from a number of different sources, and in particular, the Pacific European Union Marine Programme, or the PUMP programme, but also UNEP's Multilateral Environmental Agreements in Africa, Caribbean and Pacific Countries programme. So much of this work has required support from consultants and partners, some of who have joined today to undertake the work. And I'm going to give some examples from the themes in the action plans, which illustrate what we've been focusing on so far, and then more about what we hope to do. So under the theme of research and monitoring, we've been working with a consultant to develop a turtle extinction risk analysis, which started with a literature review. The benefit of doing something like this is that you've probably already realised it's very difficult to really get a good sense of what are the key or the primary threats affecting species. And by undertaking an extinction risk analysis, we hope that's going to be able to help point us in the right direction to where we need to use most of our resources, or direct most of our resources towards protection. Similarly, we've undertaken a review of the Pacific cetacean diversity status and threats. We've organised workshops on turtles, including around genetics. The TREADS database, the turtle database for the region, has been updated. And we've also created an action under the UN Decade of Action to support research on marine species. Under climate change, there's been some work undertaken looking at temperature, or monitoring temperature in turtle nests, and this is part of the information that goes towards the extinction risk analysis that I was mentioning before. Under the theme of threat reduction, some work has been undertaken on community use surveys of turtle use. There's a lot of work going on, national plans of action on species such as turtles, seabirds and sharks. We've done work on bycatch mitigation training and capacity development for skippers, crew and observers in Fiji. And there's a port-based outreach program which is based in Suva, and which we also are planning to expand to Vanuatu. And this includes education on how to use mitigation and provision of mitigation kits. And lastly, there's been some work undertaken on bycatch, or assessing bycatch for sharks and dolphins in PNG in the Kokori swim bladder fishery. Under the theme cultural significance and value, there's a scholarship has been awarded under the Louis Bell Scholarship to study dolphin hunt in Solomon Islands, and there's another project on the wedge-tailed shearwater in Vanuatu, which is looking at the sustainability of harvesting those birds. Under legislation, policy and management, we have undertaken translation and will be printing as well the Pacific Island Regional Marine Species Programme, and we hope to have some hard copies of those available later. Although, of course, you are aware that you can access them online. Under CITES, we undertook a pre-COP meeting held here in Samoa last year, which helped to prepare our parties for participation in that important multilateral environmental agreement. We've been supporting Vanuatu to undertake a CITES legislation review, and we're also looking at the potential to implement an electronic CITES program, which will assist with management of CITES permits. And finally, we're looking to assess the Cook Islands management of CITES and whether they want to accede to the CITES agreement. Under ecotourism and livelihoods, actually, before I go on, these next examples are from a new program that we've just begun implementing under UNEP, which we're calling the Pacific Bioscapes, and will be implemented over the next 4 years. And under the ecotourism and livelihoods theme, we're looking at developing some regional tourism guidelines that will help with best practice when tourists are being involved with interacting with marine species. And along the same lines, we're looking at developing some guidelines for tourism operators in Vanuatu, particularly for turtles. Under capacity building and collaboration, we're looking to develop monitoring manuals for both turtles and seabirds to help countries to develop best practice for monitoring those species. And following on from that, we'll be undertaking some training and capacity development as well. We do have funding that will support ongoing turtle nest monitoring as well. And finally, we are hoping to run a Pacific Seabird Symposium next year in New Caledonia, and that will be an opportunity to undertake workshops and training around monitoring seabirds. Under education, awareness and communication, we're looking to develop quite a significant turtle public awareness campaign in Papua New Guinea. And back to threat reduction, there's a couple of new projects that we're hoping to kickstart this year. One is around assessing the impacts of kava cultivation on important bird areas in Fiji and Vanuatu, and also eradicating rats in Christmas Island, the Nimruna motus. And finally, under ecosystem and habitat protection, we're going to be doing some marine KBA assessment and mapping. And as I mentioned before, when I say we, generally we are providing the resources, but we work with partners and consultants to actually undertake the work, for which we're very grateful. All right, so now we want to talk a little bit about the implementation priorities and needs. And there will be a poll running as well. And the Pacific Island Regional Marine Species Program is meant to be a guiding strategy to help members and partners to identify their priorities for action to protect marine species. But of course, we fully recognise that the technical incapacity and financial constraints that Pacific governments face and the enormous knowledge gaps that exist for many species. So we're hoping to learn today a bit about what activities, other than those that I've already talked about, but ones that you might be undertaking in your own countries and are currently being undertaken both by members and partners to address threats and knowledge gaps to marine species, and to identify any particular needs which we can assist with to build on the work that we're already doing. And the polls that we've been running during this section will help us with this whawhatai lava. So just to let you know, the first question is aimed at partners and the rest are for members. So thank you. Okay, let's end the poll and share the results. Okay, so some of these are long answers and we'll include a summary of these in our final report. But for those which are short answers, the second question was around what are the priority marine species of the 5 species groups for members. And turtles have come out on top as being the highest priority, followed by seabirds and sharks, and then whales and dolphins, and finally dugongs. And so I think that was, there was also a question 5. Do you already have management plans in place for your chosen groups? And it looks like a significant number, 60% already do. And once again, most of the questions that are left are long answer questions, and we'll summarise those later. All right, thank you very much for participating in that. All right, let's move on. Just conscious that we've got about 25 minutes left, and I think we'll easily finish before then. All right, so now it's my pleasure to introduce our guest speaker today, Sarah Wyatt. And Sarah hails from the Global Environment Facility, and she's going to talk a little bit about what that is and how that can assist us with developing implementation plans for our marine species. Sarah, would you like to open your video and unmute yourself?
Hi, I'm connecting from my phone. So I don't know if the video is working.
Yep.
Okay, I can't see it.
Fine. Yep. Go ahead.
So thank you so much for having me join you all. It's really interesting to learn about the program and about the extensive work that has already been done. To just give a quick introduction of who I am, my name's Sarah Wyatt. I am a biodiversity specialist at the GEF, for Global Environment Facility, and I specifically work with the SIDS. And so I see a few familiar faces on this call, and it's nice to be talking to you all in the Pacific from late at night here. So the GEF is the largest environmental multi-donor trust fund in the world. We work to support the protection and delivery of what we call global environmental benefits. We are a partnership of 183 countries, and we provide financial support for developing countries, or we might call them recipient countries. And I will note for SPREP's purposes that we specifically work with independent countries, and so providing kind of foreign aid to those countries to protect the global environment. We serve as the financial mechanism for, actually we need to update this slide, but for a while we've worked with 5 international environmental conventions, so the 3 Rio conventions, the Climate Change Agreement, Land Degradation, and the Convention on Biological Diversity. We also work with 2 agreements on toxic chemicals and pollutants. So those are the Stockholm Convention on Persistent Organic Pollutants and the Minamata Convention on Mercury. And I'll get into a few new things that we've added to our repertoire as I move through what I'm going to talk about. We work with 18 implementing agencies, and so these are the agencies. You can see the names there that provide the intermediary support, help countries navigate the GEF process, provide hopefully technical support, and then for the idea being that the projects are really executed by the country governments, CSOs, local organizations, rather than, so there's a kind of 2 different roles. So that's how you have to work with, for any GEF project, you have to work with one of those implementing agencies. I'll note, so we have the Asian Development Bank, UNDP, UNEP, Conservation International, the World Bank, WWF, IUCN, and FAO, and probably a few others that are relevant for the region. So those are the key kind of partners that you would be working with for a GEF project. You can go to the next slide. Okay, so how the GEF works is that for most of the GEF money, we use something called the STAR, or the System for Transparent Allocation of Resources. And the STAR is a set of equations that we use to allocate from the total amount of money that we have to say how much money does each country get to use to program or to come up with the projects they want to do over this 4-year period. So we're a year into the JEF 8 phase. So this is the 8th replenishment of the JEF. And in this phase, we have a minimum allocation for every SIDS of $8 million. And I'll note that this is actually a 100% increase from JEF 7. So just last phase, the minimum STAR allocation was $4 million. And we, in this new round, we received more money from the donors, but we also made a point that actually the LDCs and SIDS have the same floor, as we call it, or the same minimum allocation of $8 million. You'll see that it's nominally broken down by biodiversity, land degradation, and climate change mitigation. However, there's full flexibility within those areas to use that money how you like. So you could put $8 million towards a biodiversity project working on your marine species activities as part of this program, or you could go all in on renewable energy as part of climate change mitigation. Or do multiple projects as part of this initiative. So I gave this example here of Samoa, which is they're at the kind of the minimum STAR allocation. So a number of countries here are part of the minimum STAR allocation. How you actually access the resources or get the agreement is that every country has someone designated as the operational focal point within the government, often sits in the Ministry of Environment, sometimes Ministry of Foreign Affairs, or some sort of finance kind of ministry. And there's this person, you can look it up on the JEF website. That's the person who has to sign the letter that says this is a project we're interested in being part of. So, I always tell people to look to that person, the OFP. Probably many of you would know who that person is once you find their name. And they're the ones who are going to help you get access to those resources. So there are a few different ways that we could support some of the work that's being discussed here. So we could go to the next slide. And I'll talk about the two main ways that things can overlap. So our largest focal area is the focal area on biodiversity. And so, our overall goal is that globally significant biodiversity is conserved, sustainably used, and restored. I'm trying to see the small print. So there's a lot of overlap in how this work could be involved there. We do some of the kind of basic kind of data compilation and bringing together of information, as well as some sorts of surveys. And then we would often then support the designation or expansion or improvement of marine protected areas with what we're doing. We also have this line of work that we call mainstreaming. And so that is basically reducing or improving reducing the impact of productive land and sea uses on biodiversity. So we work in fisheries, in tourism, agriculture, forestry, less relevant in this context. So working with those industries to try to reduce their impact or actually have those be a force for good within those. So, an example would be, say, the tourism industry providing support for conservation that's very much needed. I think you can, with the marine species mentioned here, they often have a high tourism draw. And so they can be an opportunity to try to use them as kind of a flagship species to support conservation. And then also then in biodiversity, we have the idea of an umbrella species. And so they might be some of the kind of principal targets of a protected area, but what we know is that larger species and stuff often provide, we call it the umbrella. So you have the smaller species, the smaller animals that are going to be protected if we are providing adequate protection that serves the larger animals. So that would work again with our marine species. And so there's some other areas of work that we have that are probably less relevant, but certainly we would see a lot of overlap in the activities described. And we often talk about we will look for the fact that this is the activities that you're describing are part of plans and intentions of a country, and they fit within a larger scheme. And so this the SPREP work is really relevant for that. In addition, some of you may have heard about this Global Biodiversity Framework Fund, and this was kind of decided on at the CBD meetings in Montreal, and then we just had meetings 3 weeks ago or so in Brasilia. Our councilmen, or sort of our board, and agreed that we would house this new Global Biodiversity Framework Fund. The agreement is that a minimum of 36% of the resources, we don't exactly know how much money we're going to have to give out, but a minimum of 36% will go to LDCs and SIDS. And so, it's my AirPod just right now. And so, let this work. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, you can hear me, good. Sorry, of course the AirPod runs out at the key moment. So then we can go to so that's overall for biodiversity, that we're able to provide that kind of support, and we have a new area of support coming online. That's kind of what I wanted to highlight with that. And actually, I think there may be some opportunities for regional projects if that's what countries would like to do, especially with that other fund. The other really major area of support that we have is called international waters. Now, international waters sits outside of the STAR allocation, or you could say that it's money in addition to the STAR allocation. And the International Waters Program works through the large marine ecosystem kind of approach, and generally supports regional projects, some things related to blue economy, marine spatial planning, and those sort of building kind of the agreements and the frameworks, and then this is providing the support to them. We've provided a lot of support over the years for the RFMOs and fisheries management in the Pacific, as well as marine spatial planning and MPAs. We can certainly support MPA expansion and strengthening as part of regional projects and as part of a regional management plan strategy. So that would mean that you need more than one country. You could have a sub-region, say Micronesia might decide to work on certain activities together, or we could work with all of the Pacific. I will also note that at the same board meeting, we also agreed, or our council approved us becoming the financial mechanism for the Biodiversity Beyond National Jurisdiction agreement under the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea. And so we are figuring out some of what that means, but I think there's a lot of potential overlap or discussion that could happen with some of the activities described here. We'll be providing support for this agreement under our international waters focal area. So support for ratification of that agreement, and then kind of some of the first steps of implementation. I also wanted to make one little note, or two little notes, or push, not trying to push, but I will note that, since I'm at a SPREP session, I would like to note that countries can ask SPREP has to agree, obviously, but then you can ask SPREP to help you or to actually execute parts of GEF projects. So while SPREP is not a GEF implementing agency, so they can't be the intermediary between a government and the GEF, actually there is this benefit that means, because we want this sort of supervisory ability or anything like that to kind of keep some roles separate, but that does mean that SPREP can be can provide that execution support, and you can ask them to do certain activities, also coming with the resources that the GEF is coming from the resources the GEF is providing. So you don't have to, do everything on your own or with your own professionals. That may be kind of challenging, just, limited numbers of people. The other thing you could do is ask SPREP to try to work on developing a regional project. I think particularly under the international waters focal area, that there's kind of a natural evolution or natural next step to develop a project that would be a regional project, but trying to tap into international waters resources, which is additional money for countries. And so, but I would think SPREP needs some sort of push or guidance from the countries in order to be able to do that. And there would also be the opportunity, if you did pull together something regional with international waters, some countries could decide to undertake additional national activities, and they could put some of their STAR money. So we have these different ways that that things can come together. And my colleague Andrew Hume, who could not be here this evening or whatever afternoon it is for you, he's really the lead on this, and he's always happy to talk to people and discuss ideas and see if that's possible for us to support something or what else might be going on. And then I'll also say that I'm available, and the rest of the SIDS team at the GEF, including my colleague Asha Bob Semple, who leads our SIDS team, are available. We're always happy to answer questions and help you think through your GEF work, whether it's on marine species or otherwise. So I hope I covered everything. I'd be happy to take any questions if they're there.
Well, thanks very much, Sarah. That was very comprehensive and very useful and interesting. And we already have one question in the chat, actually, probably, which I hope you can answer. I think I already do know the answer, but just to confirm, the question is around whether the fund is available for territories such as New Caledonia.
Unfortunately, it's not, and that's a real challenge that we can have. We have had projects partner with things like the BEST initiative or other kind of regional initiatives, and so there might be some opportunities there, or you may actually have your kind of the, what is it called, the cosmopolitan government be interested in if there was something that was kind of SPREP run, that was using that was principally GEF money, but some other money might be available specifically for some of the territories to come in. So if there's already an initiative that's probably broadly GEF, that kind of support. And we're not, while we can't support, the territories, unfortunately, because our resources are foreign aid resources, if there are people at a meeting and you're paying for catering or something, we're not gonna, we're not splitting hairs on all of those specific details, but unfortunately we don't have resources.
Sure. Yeah, understood. But basically you're saying for a regional project that happened to overlap with New Caledonian waters, then, that would still be okay. I mean, you couldn't necessarily...
To complete the activities, we've had things where, the government of, the French government might come in and say, we will support our activities here in our part of, okay, we're part of this agreement and we're going to support our activities and, within our waters. Because oftentimes, while we have these regional agreements, it's often national actions on the ground. And so those parts we really can't support, unfortunately.
No. Okay, great, thank you. Does anybody else have a question? If you want to raise your hand, turn on your video, let us know for Sarah before we move on. Just running our eyes down the list. No burning questions for Sarah. Okay, well, thanks very much for that, Sarah. That was really useful, and I'm sure we'll be coming back to you at some point.
Thank you.
hoping to get some guest support. All right, so we're now going to move on to other items of interest.
Now this won't take very long, which is good because we have about 5 minutes left. So we wanted to just quickly remind you of the databases that we, manage and are available to you. So first of all is the TREDS database, which is the Turtle Research and Monitoring Database System. And TREDS can be used to collate data from strandings, tagging, nesting, emergence and beach surveys, as well as other biological data. Can also be used to monitor and sustainably manage marine turtle populations, as well as their nesting and foraging sites. And you can visit our website or contact Unity for more information. And then secondly, we have our Strandings of Oceania database, which was established to improve understanding of marine mammal populations in the Pacific by recording details of stranded whales, dolphins and dugongs. On our website, you'll find more information about the database, including guidance on how to access and use it, as well as data collection forms that you can download and print to use in the field. And feel free to contact myself to find out more or to submit any data to be included in that database. There are some other upcoming webinars that you might be interested in. We are working with the EU Ocean Governance Project for a webinar about the Marine Mammals Management Toolkit, which is a tool for MPA managers. And that should be around the end of August. There's also going to be a seabird rescue seminar series, which will talk about, be 3 seminars that talk about general rescue, boiled seabirds and veterinary care. And then in October, I'll be running a webinar about the Strandings of Oceania database and how to use it. And then there's just a couple of relevant working groups with the Pacific Island Roundtable. There's the Species Working Group, which you can get in touch with Karen about. But then there's this new Nature Culture Working Group. And the purpose of this is to facilitate and document the weaving of cultural heritage, knowledge and expressions of culture into conservation policy, programming and project development and design. And additionally, it aims to foster a wider, more inclusive and culturally aware conservation community in the region. And you can contact James Tremlett at this email address if you're interested in joining that working group or getting any more information. Do you want to do this?
Yeah, okay. All right, that's almost the end. I just noticed we've got a question or two, excuse me, before we finish in the chat. I see there was a question about the regional, in the regional dugong plan, there's an action around developing regional education and public awareness resources for dugongs. And there was a question that, or commented that they would be very interested in that. And obviously all of the objectives and actions that we have in the plan are all dependent on finding funding and resources. And sad to say we don't actually have anything specifically around dugongs currently. It is a big gap, and maybe that's something that the GIF facility can assist us with in finding resources to help us with implementing some of the objectives around dugongs. I know there is a lot of work already been undertaken in some jurisdictions, for example, in New Caledonia. Claire, who was on the meeting, I think she might have left now, mentioned some work that they're going to be doing around that just recently or in the near future. But as I say, it is really dependent on us being able to access funds. So we'll be doing our best, but we can't guarantee it. And I don't think there are any other questions in the chat. Please feel free to email us or contact us if you have any further questions. If you feel you didn't get all of the answers down that you're hoping to get down and you want to add to it, then again, please feel free. I know Hannah sent the questions out to all of you prior to this meeting so that you could have a little think about them, and feel free to get back to us with any further comments that you have. But we would appreciate if you did that within the next couple of weeks so that we can start working on the final report. So I would just like to thank my colleagues. Oh, sorry, Christina. I see you have your hand raised.
Yes, there's been mention of regional projects, possibilities of regional projects that SPREP could assist countries in developing. So is that something that if we've got ideas for, we pass them on to you, or is there like another workshop or something that can happen that can look at what potential regional projects might be interested? I'm not sure how far each country have got down on the Jeff 8 projects, and whether that one's we haven't got time to do that for Jeff 8, or looking at other things, because sometimes I think the countries find out about projects after the funding's happened and the projects have been designed. I wonder whether it might be useful to try and do it from the other way up, to have some meetings to try and find out what the countries and NGOs and people are interested in doing on a regional basis, and then looking for the funding after that way round.
Yeah, no, thanks, Christine. I totally agree. I think, you know, it's you guys that are doing the work on the ground that really have the best understanding of what's needed, and you know, both on a national but also on potentially a regional basis. So I think, you know, in terms of regional projects, definitely just get in touch with us. I mean, now that we've been in contact with GEF and have a better understanding of how we might be able to develop some regional projects, I'm very keen to try and do that. And so, you know, any ideas that you might have would definitely be appreciated. We don't have any plans at the moment to have any further workshops, but Hannah is going to work directly with countries on a national basis who are interested to develop some national plans around how they might use the GEF funds. So that's more on a national basis, but certainly in terms of regional, get in touch with me.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. And thanks, Claire, also for your comment that we've just seen in the chat. People will be aware of important marine mammal areas in the Pacific, which is a mechanism to identify those most important sites that could be identified for protection of marine mammals in the Pacific. There's a great website. If you don't know about it, go and have a look at it. And it looks like Claire's suggesting they're going to be putting together a special issue of Pacific conservation biology that looks at that. So thanks for that, Claire. It's really helpful. All right, and finally, as we've said before, we will create a short report that summarises the poll results and what we've talked about here. And there will also be the presentation and recording available on our website, and we will get in touch with anyone who's indicated they want to work together on implementation plans. And if you didn't manage to get that into the polls, then get in touch with us directly, and Hannah will be working on that over the next few months. Okay, so thanks everybody for making time to join us, and particularly like to thank Sarah for joining us and providing that information about the GEF 8 facility, and thank to my colleagues Hannah and Unity for helping to prepare for this webinar, and hope to hear from you all soon.